There are two things that can kill the internet. One is overregulation and the other one is underregulation.
We have some laws that are very good. They're sectoral specific laws dealing with health information. We have financial laws protecting financial information. Those laws are great as long as the data is in the silos that were envisioned in the 1990s and early 2000s. Data does not respect those silos. Data is flowing everywhere.
Who you call on your phone or who you send a text message to on your phone, that's considered CP&I, which is protected. But if you have a Google phone app, the Google phone app is capturing who you're calling and who you're texting as well. And so that data, when it's collected by Google, it's not subject to the CP&I rules. And our big fear in the area of Title II is that we're going to get a whole bunch of rules that are designed to give consumers comfort that their data is being protected when in fact it's a very limited set of data and it's a limited set of players that the quote-unquote protections are actually working for.
But we can't place so much of the emphasis on consumers. It is going to be way too much burden on them to try to navigate this system. So we're trying to define some of the outer boundaries in which companies can act and where they will be crossing the lines. But as long as they're not in the area of what is impermissible, there's a lot that they can do to innovate.
We've had 2,000-3,000 years to develop our notion of what physical property is. We have never even started the conversation about what rights in data means. Facebook doesn't create any data, right? Facebook creates the environment within which we interact with them and create the data. And so if you argue that consumers have an interest in that data, you begin to unpack this in an interesting way.
There's some aspects of data that very clearly we can say this is the customer data. And then there's data that you derive from customer data, and then it gets really complicated after that.
How are consumers getting segmented and profiled? Things like ethnic second city struggler or urban scramble, both of which were profiles that were largely populated by African Americans and Latinos who were mostly like single parents struggling to make it. You can see a bank wanting to use that information that wants to offer an introductory product to try to bring them out of a financially disadvantaged situation. Then other times you're going to see scam artists using the exact same information to harm those individuals.
Security is a 24/7 job. Anytime you're storing data in one central location and you're putting a bunch of data together, you're a target.
What I see happening now is there's a tremendous amount of competition on privacy, on the attribute of privacy. Snapchat, Whisper, a lot of other services are defining themselves, are differentiating themselves through their ephemerality.
Our business model is becoming more like a bank's business model, because at the end of the day, our reputation for how we deal with that data is really what's going to allow us to continue to be successful in the future.
Where it gets interesting is if companies are extracting data from users without really users having a full understanding of what's happening, and then that company gets hacked, and it turns out that the company had data that the user didn't really even understand that they had, then I see why a user is upset about that loss. Whereas if they have a consensual relationship and a defined contractual relationship, including an indemnification, it's a much more balanced relationship. In an alternative universe, which I don't think will exist a year from now, you can imagine a scenario where users' data is stored in a user-controlled data store, and companies go to the data instead of the users going to the company. And in that world, it would be a third party, a company that emerges just to manage that data on behalf of users, and users would choose which data store based on the values and the trust in the brand that they had.
For most consumers, I think a recent study said they're 5 times more worried about their security than their privacy. And in a sense, they've already given up on the privacy aspect.